John 1:1, and the Word was God. A God, the indefinite article. One argument against the translation, the Word was a God, is that the indefinite article, the letter A, has been added. The objection is that adding words to Scripture is illegitimate. This is but another case of a false Trinity proof argument being dependent upon the ignorance of its victim. What is artfully hidden in this argument is that there is no indefinite article anywhere in the earliest copies of the Greek New Testament. Whenever you see an a or an in an English New Testament, it too has been added by the translators. We can observe an exact parallel in Acts 28:3-6. A venomous spider had bitten Paul's hand. He shook it off into the fire, suffering no ill effects. Those around him expected him to die, and the anonymous author of Acts tells us that when he did not, the onlookers, quote, said that he was a god, King James Version, etc. The Greek, having no indefinite article, simply states that they said he was theos. English translators, aware that John did not intend to state that the onlookers had said that Paul was the supreme being, added the indefinite article. No one accuses these translators of illegitimacy here, for context makes clear that the indefinite article is implied, that they didn't think that Paul was the God, but rather a God. Context is also why the indefinite article is added to John 1:1. The immediate context is that the Word was with God, and so could not have been God. The broader context is that John said that Jesus was sent by, spoke for, and did the works of God. These verses, in depicting relationship between Jesus and God, disqualify Jesus from being God. It is entirely proper to add the indefinite article to the English translation of John 1:1 in order to clarify its meaning, just as it was added in order to clarify the meaning of Acts 28:6 and is added in every instance of its appearance in English translations of the New Testament. Quote, grammatically, the Word was a God is a possible translation since it is legitimate to supply the indefinite article when no article is present in the Greek text. Dr. Constable's Expository Bible Study Notes, Notes on John, 212 edition, Dr. Thomas Constable, THM, THD, Senior Professor Emeritus of Bible Exposition, Dallas Theological Seminary. Quote, the Logos is not God in the strict sense. Theos and Hotheos were not the same in this period. It was quite possible in Jewish and Christian monotheism to speak of divine beings that existed alongside and under God, but were not identical with him. Commentary on the Gospel of John, Ernst Hankchen, pages 108 and 111. Colwell's rule. In 1933, a theologian named E.C. Colwell published an article in the Journal of Biblical Literature explaining why, in cases like John 1:1c, a noun could be considered as definite even though not preceded by a definite article. He was likely motivated by a desire to defend the Trinitarian translation from criticism based upon the absence of the article. For many years following its initial publication, Trinity apologists seized upon Colwell's rule as proof that the non-Trinitarian translation of the passage was illegitimate. Ultimately, its defenders fought back, citing many reasons why it did not invalidate their translation. As a result, the resort to this rule has largely fallen by the wayside. Context. There is nothing wrong with Colwell's rule per se. There certainly are instances meeting Colwell's criteria in which a noun without the article may be understood as being definite. The problem comes in the Trinitarian misrepresentation of the rule. Colwell made clear that when context dictates, the absence of the definite article can be understood as an indication that a noun is being used in the indefinite sense. Quote, it is indefinite when the context demands it. Rule for the use of the article in the Greek New Testament, E.C. Colwell, Journal of Biblical Literature, 52, 1933, page 20. The context in John's book is that God and his word are separate entities, one being sent by and doing the will and works of the other, and said in the verse to be with one another. Don't let the lofty name fool you. Colwell's rule does not undermine the legitimacy of the non-Trinitarian translation of John 1:1c. It supports it. A divine being. Quote, in John 1:1c, God is used without the article. The Word, whom John has just distinguished from the person of God, is nevertheless a divine being in his own right. The Four Gospels, an introduction, Bruce Wouter, CM, page 38. Quote, there is no article. In effect, this gives an adjectival quality to the second use of theos, so the phrase means the Word was divine. The Translator's New Testament footnote, page 451, 1973. Quote, divine is a better translation because the Greek definite article is not present. International English Bible, Extreme New Testament, footnote to John 1:1c, 2001. Trinitarianism sometimes argues that a divine being is just another way of saying God, but many theologians note a distinction between the two, that a divine being applies to lesser entities, while the divine being is a description reserved for God alone. Quote, the Logos was divine, not the divine being himself. J.H. Thayer, author of Thayer's Greek-English Lexicon of the New Testament, from a handwritten note in his copy of Griesbach's New Testament. Quote, Christ would not be equated absolutely with God, but only described as a being of divine nature. New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology, Volume 2, page 80. Quote, we must take theos without the article in the indefinite sense of a divine nature or a divine being, as distinguished from the definite absolute God, ho theos. Dissertation on the Logos, G. Luck. Quote, John 1:1 should rigorously be translated, the Word was a divine being. Dictionary of the Bible, Trinitarian Jesuit John L. Mackenzie, 1965.